Greetings, Tauvar, and have I got a special episode for you today? I am joined by the man, the legend, some may say the TIGERSHARK King, Lewis Smith. How are you doing, buddy? You good?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Just don't call me the Tiger Shark King. That makes me sound like the Short King, which is a very negative thing. Um,
Okay.
but thank you for the very kind words.
So,
How are you
Lewis,
doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I've had to have like a week off after LGT because, like you, I did, some may say, play too many 40k games with the Invitational and the main event. And you had one hell of a run also, and you ended up playing, was it like 9 games of 40k?
Yeah, I've done a working week in 3 days
Yeah.
for something which is meant to be a hobby. So yeah, I had a really great time. But just like you said, all the ridges in my brain were gone by Tuesday, and
Yeah.
I was traveling for work. So I've also had a bit of a break. Now jumping back on it, and what better place to be for that than talking with you?
Yeah, well,
So
thanks for taking the time to come and join us and talk about Tau. So, for those of you who don't know Lewis, Lewis and I have met at many UKTC events, and as a fellow Tau connoisseur, and we've always had slightly different lists, but been rocking and loving using Tau at events. And Lewis, how long have you been playing 40k for in general, would you say?
um, so ignoring the usual story of playing as a child,
Yeah.
I picked it up again probably like around Indomitus time of ninth edition. So it was like lockdown, let's say, and I was doing Crusade with friends over Discord and TTS, and we were doing painting chats to pass the time. Um, and then after that kind of like casual experience of where basically I was playing Blood Angels and my collection was just Predators, Battle Predators, Contemptors with assault cannons, just cool things. I moved to London for work in 2022, and I don't think it was much long after that I attended my first event, which was the London Open, which used to run twice a year, I think. And that was like my first foray into competitive 40k. And it also is probably a good chance just to mention the London scene as well, because that's how I met many of my friends and the people I play regularly in 40k, which are through the London Wargaming Guild, which you might have heard of yourself, and also Bad Moon Cafe, which is local to me and is one of the best shops you can find in the country or the world as well for playing 40k. So yeah, I mentioned one army there, but and I imagine you're going to ask about Tau itself, but before I played Tau, which has only been during 10th edition, so about a year I've been playing Tau. Before that, I've played Drakari, Custodians, which I don't really want to admit, but I've said it. Demons, a huge amount of demons. They're such a fun army in 9th edition. Um, and I've got a Marines army as well. There's probably others that I've forgotten, but there's at least four there that I've mentioned before I found myself a pulse rifle.
Found yourself a pulse rifle and was like, never look back. So what drew you to, obviously, the game in general? Are you saying like lockdown, it more like a friends kind of thing, the narrative and stuff like that, and then obviously you somehow landed on Tau. What drew you to Tau without giving me the cliche? Well, Gundam's cool. What was your main reason for getting into Tau?
Well, I'll stay silent for like a minute then while I think of another reason. But yeah, I think there's definitely when I first picked them up, there was a very clear difference between how they appeared to play, at least at a superficial level compared to the previous army I played. Like I was heavily in melee with demons at the end of ninth edition and for one game in 10th, which nearly made me quit the game, to be honest, because it was dreadful at being on 10th edition. And I had Drakari, and I was looking at like these models in my hands, being like, these are butter knives. I don't want these. I want to change my playstyle completely. I also think from a technical point of view as a 40k player, um, it's one thing to make a charge and still end up on an objective, and it doesn't matter if you failed the combat, you still kind of achieved what you wanted. The game plays very differently with a gunline army where you're trying to achieve the same overarching goals of a 40k game of denying primary, scoring secondary, where you can only do that at range. So that in itself presented a different challenge. I'm still going to say it was the model range, which it sounds like you wanted me not to say, but like it was unbelievably cool when I got like, I think it was like Leicester event, which is probably like right at the end of ninth edition. I was playing Mike Hooper, I think his name.
Yes.
Like a Team Iceland player, and like he was just like, oh, here's two aircraft, here's some battle suits which have like 20 drones, and you know, this guy goes up and down, this guy has 30 shots. I'm exaggerating, but like, you know, it's just like insanity. And I was like, this is just really cool. I love the depth of all these upgrades and how you can play around with what a unit has. Whereas admittedly, I had 2 Void Raven bombers against him and like Incubi and Grotesque. So we were playing the same level of bullshit, let's say. But he was doing it in a way that I was like, oh, I want to be on his side of the battle, to be honest. So I picked it up. I think maybe like the way I approached it probably was like the collection that many people had at the end of ninth. I bought like 18 Crisis and I was like, oh, I'm going to play that for a while. And as probably yourself, the Tetris, like I went that way as well. And then I think it didn't take long for me to start just kind of making my own styled list based on how I wanted to play the army. And I think that's kind of brought me to where I am now.
I think it's really interesting when I interview Tau players and they talk about the reason I put you on the spot and said you can't talk about Gundam and stuff is because we all have that same excitement. It's a battle suit. Nice. I want it all of them, big robots. But it's interesting when you talked about like the kind of the play style, and you're like, oh, this is different because Tau is an anomaly when it comes to the game of 40k. And it's I find that with all the people that I've interviewed, we've all kind of had that same approach, whereas it's a different type of puzzle. Whereas no other army can give us this puzzle to solve like Tau does. And it's a very difficult army to pilot. A lot of people from the opposing end just think, oh, you just shoot good, and then good fast gun, good gun, and you kill us. But actually there's so many different things that we have to layer in the play style and the positioning and the target allocation and the resource management that it's almost like an addictive drug, because you can always improve and you can always be challenged, and perfecting that craft is something that I find within Tau players, that they're always pursuing enhancing their performance and always pursuing success, if you will. And Tau, I think, is a very rewarding army when you get it right, but a frustrating army at the beginning. Would you say that kind of mirrors like your own opinion, or have you got a different opinion on the faction?
Yeah, I'm just going to take a slight pause. It's going to feel like an eternity, but I do want to give you a genuine answer. I think because it may almost sound contradictory when I said that, like when I first picked up the army, like it felt very different to other things. But I think now that I've played it for a year, and also after playing 2 of the best guard players in the world, I actually have bizarrely come to the conclusion now that there are other armies which are very similar in playstyle, at least with how other people play it. So maybe it's better to say it's the approach to playing the game rather than specifically the faction. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but at least from playing David and Nassim on guard, it actually feels like a Tau army, at least in their hands. And I think that definitely points towards that kind of different way of approaching the game and the punishing nature of it. But with reps and experience, it can actually be much better in circumstances depending on what you're playing against and the mission and the terrain, and achieve something which other people can't do. And I think almost the feeling of it that for me that I have when I play Tau, particularly when you're winning, and this may happen with other armies that you play as well, is you have complete agency and your opponent just puts their hands up and says, there's nothing I can do because I don't know how to counter it. And I think you can get that feeling sometimes when Eldar plays into Tau and they're dancing around you and you can't do anything to do. But I think that also is just like the natural feeling of when you've kind of mastered an army and your opponent still has a ways to come. And that's kind of like what I would have, aspired. That's what I aspired to get out of the army, at least. And I think in the end, yeah, it can be challenging, but you just kind of work out how to play it, and that's why I was calling guard Tau adjacent, because you could write a guard list which plays like a Tau army, and still do just as well.
So I think that's actually going to bring forward one of my questions, and I think I might as well get it out now while we're on the topic. So what would you say is your biggest lesson that you've learned with playing Tau over the last year?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious thing which comes to mind at a list writing stage is to not just shove every single unit you like, all the big toys, into a list. I think that's probably made the biggest difference for just improving quality of game. This is a very practical thing to say, but I think it's still important, is that it's very easy to start writing a list, and it even may sound quite conservative to say I should only have 1,200 points of my list actually being units for shooting in a Tau army. That might sound outrageous or blasphemy, but I found it really important with this army to leave room for chaff, leave room for scoring units, and utility pieces and the layers of how it complements the other things you're bringing. Because without that, it can feel very dysfunctional at times, even if you set it up perfectly and play a perfect game. And I don't think an army of guns, even though that's how the book is presented, kind of precludes you from having to do that, which many armies have to do. So I think that's quite important. And then I guess the other layer to that is finding out what within the Tau book serves those purposes. And that may not be as discrete or clear as, for example, this unit has an ability which says almost reads quite literally and explicitly, this is there to score, Vespid. It says on its data sheet, pick it up and put it down. That reads as scoring. But there's other units where you may realize it has a combination of features which you can't get with anything else, and you got to do it. So an example which we may bring up later is my list had 3 Star Scythe in it. That's not for the name it's called, but it's because it moves 10, it has 6 OC, it has a deep strike keyword and the Markerlight keyword. There's a combination of 4 things there which I couldn't get from anything else, and it felt like the right choice at the time. And I think those made a really big difference, is starting to make choices about realizing from the reps what I needed to kind of add to my army, and it's not just always more ion as it was at the beginning of 10th when I was running probably 50 cyclic ion blasters. Yeah. Do you have any do you want to weigh in on that? Was there anything I said specifically you wanted to elaborate on?
I think you highlighted it very well, and it's it's almost like in every army you've always got the go-to units, and sometimes you hear this thing of just insert 3 of the best thing multiple times, but you got to think about the role, and you highlighted that very well without replicating what you said. It's think about the purpose of why I'm taking it, what can it offer me, what tools to put in your toolbox. So it was obviously obvious to me when I'm looking at your list and thinking, right, yeah, you put in these particular things for very specific roles, and then obviously if we're kind of appealing to the newer beginner players out there and aspiring Tau generals, then it isn't always just about putting as much damage. It's think about what role, what you're wanting to get out of these selections in your list. So, and I think obviously nobody can question you on it because you did very well, and I'd like to highlight that, and I'd like to talk a little bit about your performance, if I may. So Lewis came 4th at LGT. Now, for those pessimists, you might be thinking, oh, well, you didn't podium, but 4th at LGT out of, I think it was 834 players in one of the hardest competitive fields in the world is an amazing achievement, with an army that is pretty much average or just below the kind of curve and not a meta army. And for me, as a Tau enthusiast, it was amazing to see, and from my perspective, I'm super proud of what you did. But not only that, Lewis, there's a couple of, and I love stats, there's a couple of things that happened. Number one, I'll get the boring numbers out the way, and then there's one particular thing that you achieved that I know that you're proud of, and a lot of your friends and fellow members in the community are as well, is that your global ELO ranking, which is on the stat check, went up by 101 places. And that's because you not only won 8 out of 9 of your games, you were going against, like, should we say, top world players. You know, Nassim Fuchain, David Gaylord, to mention a few. Phenomenal players at the game. And you managed to etch the win in both of these games that you had. And they were obviously positioned a lot higher than you in the original rankings. And then obviously that's pushed you up to 45th out of 226,097 players registered in the world. So top 50. And then in the UKTC rankings, you are positioned in top 25 of the season that's just finished. And I just think from a back end of not just your consistent performance in other events, but the LGT being the pinnacle of the final of the UKT season and an event that people are preparing for months and months on end, you should be super proud of your performance. So well done on that, Lewis. And there's one particular award that I think that actually came as a surprise to you. Do you want me, for modest reasons, to tell you what it is, or do you want to talk about it yourself?
Well, now I have to say it. So, I think, the greatest achievement for myself from this event was getting best overall. Yeah. And I think the combination of the performance in terms of play, but also sportsmanship and painting is something which I pride myself in much more, especially because I think the gratification, maybe that's just because of finding it more challenging to paint, and also I'm only human. It is hard sometimes to not get tilted, and you want to give someone the best player experience. And I genuinely felt from this event, every single game I came away from was really, really great, and every opponent was lovely. And of course, that helps me with kind of mirroring that. But like, those are things which I aspire to and encourage everyone else. And also, I think Zach was describing it from this event as well, of like the least number of complaints across the entire tournament in terms of sportsmanship, and the highest number of people getting recognition for the quality of the game. And I think that just mirrors what I care about in terms of the 40k community and the direction we're heading, and I find it incredibly validating. I think so that's something which I really wanted to say. I think also, just as an aside, I didn't believe that I got it. It was during the final game, the sixth game, so the penultimate game on day 2. That makes it sound even worse. We're going to call it the 11th hour.
The 11th hour.
Playing a game, and I get a text from a friend because I'm in tunnel vision, playing someone else that I really enjoy playing against. I was playing Louis Bullington for the third time tournament. And I get a text from my friend, and he's like, "You just won best overall," and I assume that he's taking the piss, and I'm going to have to walk over to the TO desk to find out that you're not. You were just being trolled. So it's very, very nice to get that. And I've come close before, but my painting wasn't quite up to scratch because there are many great painters at the tournament. But it kind of reflects every aspect of the hobby which I enjoy. I love to play, particularly with other people, as opposed to TTS. That's really something I value: the social side, the painting, and then of course like the sportsmanship. So yeah, even if I had got that and lost my 6th game and just went home, still would have been a great event. I'd like to think I'd still be on here anyway. So
absolutely. And I mean, we were talking before, because even though we've met at events, we've not had a chance to actually talk in person outside of events and stuff like that. And you are a very modest gentleman, and I can see exactly why you won the best overall, because playing the game the right way is a thing that's thrown around a lot over the internet since sportsmanship has become a focus. But there are people that actually have it intrinsically built into them, that enjoy not just the social aspect, but being challenged as a general and having a competitive game. And it's not win at all costs. It's very much, I would like to win, but not at the detriment of being an ass or winning it by doing certain things that are considered gotchas. And I think the community is growing and growing and growing, and the more people we have like you, Lewis, the better the game is going to be. So a round of applause for you. You deserve it. The paint, your army looks amazing and stunning. your sportsmanships couldn't be better, and obviously you happened to land in the top 16 and then went to 4th, and that is an absolute golden run in my opinion. So without blowing too much smoke off your up your backside, well done, buddy. Honestly, really appreciate having you on for this. So
yeah.
Now
there's one more thing I want to add. Sorry, and it's just an interesting thing to say about the community, and the wonderful thing about the UK scene is it is not the first time I have been complimented for these things, at least coming from players, and that really means a lot. And I think it's something that we all do without realizing, and is a really positive aspect, and I think should encourage everyone to kind of to do it as well, because like I have played plenty of X and O games where you're playing against someone else who comes up to it, and when the first thing they say to you is, "Oh, you played my friend," and they say something nice, or someone else is looking over the table, like I think that's like it's the best thing you could ask for. And as I know it can sound backhanded where they say, "Oh, you're a nice guy," like you'd rather them say you're a good player.
Yeah.
But like it still means a huge amount, and I think it shows, because the more I play, I've played a lot of tournament games now, even though I mentioned I've only been playing competitively for, let's say, 2 full years. Like the more you play, the more you realize there's people who have the same view towards the game, even at the highest level, and they're definitely getting more of a platform, because that's what I'm hearing as well, inside events and also outside of them.
I'd agree, and similar sort of feedback that I've had, especially on the game that was streamed at the Leeds when I was playing Jack Tight in the semi-final. One of the comments that I received directly was that, is this really how top players play? And it was actually a comment in the thing, and it was like, and then Richard Siegler was like, yes, this is 100% what top players do. They have a bit of banter, but they also play at that level where you're constantly communicating, you're having fun, regardless of the outcome. And some people were saying, well, I wish my experience was like that, but it's actually restored my faith in going to another event, because there are always going to be those 1 or 2% that's just win at all costs, but it's getting less and less nowadays. So if you are thinking of going to events and you are maybe hearing horror stories, honestly, put that thought in the bin, go and experience it. You will meet 99.9% of people that just love to be there and want to make this game a better game for the future. And honestly, it's come on in leaps and bounds. So yeah, honestly, I love the scene, and I want just the better for it going forward.
Yeah, and everyone I've played at that event mirrors that behavior. I went in being like, let's have a good time, and they had a good time, whether they were going to have a beer or not. Like it didn't matter. Like it's just like that's like the epitome of a good game of 40k is like you'll encounter these people and you've never met them before, but like it's very disarming as soon as you start asking about who they are, where they're from, what they played before, and sooner or later you come away from the game basically your friend, and that's that in itself should encourage people to go, especially for the first time, I imagine, because if a lot of people of your audience haven't played a tournament before, they're naturally going to be going alone, and I don't think that should be a reason to not go. As another point, and certainly you shouldn't worry that people aren't going to be nice, because even at the highest level, they were, they took their loss as well, even if they were shot by a tiger shark. So,
speaking of tiger shark, do you want to run through your list? Do you have it open ready?
No, but maybe I can probably rattle it off the top of my head in terms of like key aspects of it.
I tell you what,
tell me what you'd rather.
I'll read the list because I've got it open here, which, apologies for putting you in the spot. If I had it open here, why do I ask the question? Anyway, monkey brain. So it was called Sharkgeddon. It was a Kion detachment. It had a Cadre Fireblade with the 2 gun drones and the exemplar of the Kion. It had a second Cadre Fireblade with 2 gun drones. Shadow Sun as the Warlord. 2 Breacher teams with a Guardian Drone gun drone. 2 Devilfish as dedicated transports, armed with the stock Seeker missiles, accelerated burst cannon, but smart missile systems. A Star Scythe battlesuit team with all flamers. The team leader, the Shaspray, will have a marker drone gun drone, and then the others have the 2 gun drones and 2 shield drones for bring it down purposes. Ghost Keel Battlesuit with the support system, Cyclonic Ironraker, Twin Fusion. Pathfinder team with 2 gun drones, recon drone, the 3 iron rifles, pretty standard as we see in most TOW lists. A Piranha with a fusion blaster and obviously stock seeker missiles. 3 iron Riptides with the smart missile systems and the missile drones that come with them. 3 stealth suits. The team leader has got the battlesuit support system for fallback shoot, and it's got a fusion blaster, and then they've got the homing beacon as standard and a marker drone shield drone. And then we've got a TIGERSHARK, not to be confused with the TIGERSHARK X01 or whatever it's called. This one is armed to the teeth, the 2 iron cannons, the 2 cyclic iron blasters, the missile pods, the 6 seeker missiles, and because drones aren't a thing, it's got the 2 Sky Spear missile racks. So, talk to me a little bit about your list creation then. So, what was the theory behind it? What planning were you doing? What were you preparing for?
Yep. So I think there's a general kind of evolution point of lists in 10th edition with TOW, and I can't take any credit for this. It's because it's kind of like a collective discovery, let's say, or confirmation or realization. Pardon me. Is Triptide is probably a handicap, and everyone plays it because it's the most points efficient data sheet in the book, whether it was 160 or 180. Like, it's absurd.
Triptide's eternal.
It truly is. I wasn't playing the game when I heard you could take 9 of them, but I know that was a thing. It's obviously a starting point in terms of like a unit you want to take. They are the best in Calyon in terms of the amount of output is the highest over any detachment. It's like if we're going to start from the list of how most people look at TOW from the outside, it's what are your guns, and like obviously I was going to pack the biggest gun, and that was Triptide. I think the comparison to make is that early 10th edition with the Index is that was effectively a 6-man unit of Crisis with Cyclics and a commander, but not only is that unit not in the book anymore, but it would be dysfunctional in this detachment, at least on the terrain we play, because you can't fire and fade. So it kind of removed any element of unit in the list which is less survivable and is unable to stand in the open once it's exposed itself. And I think that is a general design point for Calyon and something I was aware of. So I wasn't going to bother with like small crisis units with commanders which start to approach 200, 300 points. I wasn't going to take that is basically half of the data sheets in the book, to be honest. I wasn't going to take Kroot, for example, just because I could achieve I don't know why you would take Kroot Riders, for example, or the melee ones, at least in Calyon, but like it kind of diminishes what you're left with. I think once you take Triptide, it definitely makes sense to have Shadow Sun, not just for the rerolls aura, but in Calyon it lets you abuse or take advantage of some of the best strats in the detachment, which is the being able to put her back into strategic reserve alongside stealth suits and ghost kills. Why would you not run a ghost kill if it's the most offensive unit you could pick up with a stratagem, so you could use it aggressively as well for scoring, for example? There's also, I don't know if you're required to make Shadow Sun your warlord, but I definitely wanted her to be my warlord for the same reason, because then it enables secret mission play with picking her up and putting her on your opponent's objective.
It is mandatory that you have to take as a warlord. It's the only character in our codex that says yes.
Yeah, but for the same reason, you would probably do that if you're playing Retaliation Cadre, and you would put that. We're going to call it an ability because it is an ability with that secret mission. You would put it on your commander with the Uppy Downy relic. So there was a conscious choice there. I think there's breaches. I'm going to save the best for last. There are breaches that they are primary scoring units, but they are phenomenally high output. So I've got 2 units there, as well as a unit of Pathfinders, which are kind of like my 3rd unit. And I have also played lists with 3 units of breaches where only 2 of them have Cadres, for example, and partly because they're 20 OC and a heinous amount of damage, and it's just a further unit which I will be using generally to deny opponents points, and like deploying them when I can kind of tick all the boxes. They can score either because it's creating a differential and they're also killing something, and in a worst case, I'll be using them as screens in the worser matchups. But they have a role, and I don't think it's very unique to see breachers and devilfish in a Tau list. Maybe how I use them is more important, that we can come back to later. The stealth suits I don't think need explaining, for the same reason you're having Shadow Sun and is the best spotter in the book.
Yeah.
The Ghost Kill, I mentioned its interaction with the detachment rules, but also like I really, really like it in primary play. Just as a general point, lone ops, I was running Onva in every single list in the index for the same reason, that like if you put her in the middle, you have to come and deal with it, and that kind of starts a trading war and a positive way of interacting with your opponent's army that favors Tau, because you can shoot them when they have to come out to deal with your lone operative. So a Ghost Kill going towards the center is very uncomfortable for many armies which don't want to go to the middle of the battlefield, which is the most open point. So it has value there. It also allows you to stand in open firing lanes and whittle at people without being attacked back. So it has a slight function. It's a bit like the fourth Riptide in that sense. There's about 100. Sorry?
I like the fact that you also, something that you, maybe I've cut you off and you're going to explain, but I like also the theory of you've got one Ghost Kill and Shadow Sun. So that's two lone operatives that can be on two separate objectives and do, heinous crimes, primaries, securing. Indirect was obviously going to be a thing that was going to be contended with, especially with sisters and
exactly.
Assists. So you've planned
it definitely mitigates some things which other armies have, which could be countering a list without them. Let's say there's a good argument for running two Ghost Kills. Like, I have the points for it. I was about to say there's about 160 points of flex in my list without even changing what it fundamentally does, by just cutting a Piranha and 3 stealth suits. There was a conscious choice behind them in my list going into LGT, but like you could swap them out for other things that you like, and there's a good reason to swap them out now that Vesper to come out. They're a bit more appealing for secondary play. But just to mention those units briefly, my Star Scythes, I was taking them because firstly, if I'm deep striking them, it's one of the only units in the book which doesn't have a character keyword that you can deep strike with a marker drone. So that lets you spot for angles where you're not coming on from strat reserve and you can't get there by foot slogging. So that's just a very useful thing to have on the cheapest unit to do it, which doesn't really give up secondaries as much as a commander. So you may recall that people were running Inceptors at 110 points. Like, why wouldn't you run 3 Star Scythe?
Yeah.
So it does that. They score. Killing 14 wounds of battle suits is a pain in the arse. They don't, like 5 jump pack intercessors don't kill that unit without like buffs. You can't. They're not just going to throw it in there. They'll like plink them and then I fall back and flame you. Like, and it's more OC. So like, there's already something in the meta I've identified that every list in Marines has 3 of or 2 of. Like, it's a nice thing to have. They're also, just for example, talking about secondary play. There's not many units in the Tau book which can walk to the middle of the battlefield or the central objective from your deployment zone without advancing, and that prevents you from doing cleanse, for example. So they're a unit I'm happy to start on the board in certain matchups where their guns are less relevant, just to send ahead, cause a little headache. I did that in the game against Nassim. It's the most flexible unit in a sense of I'm happiest to throw it away, and maybe the dice goes my way and he doesn't kill the whole thing. So, and then it survives for another turn because you can kind of string them out or position them in awkward ways. So they're just they're kind of interesting and unusual. And then also, just as a general point, going into LGT, I was acutely aware, as probably yourself was, that Sisters is going to be one of the most popular armies. It's, it's a great data sheet into them, and I was happy to add that and maybe give me that slightly, let's say 5% edge, which I didn't have, and just make it feel even more comfortable.
I also think that the star scythe give a unique solution to a problem when it comes to primary. And I'm going to give this top tactic to the listeners and I'm sure it's probably come up in some of your games, but if you imagine your ghost keel on an objective, for example, he's only OC 3. And what a lot of top players will do, or they'll identify that I'm not going to kill the thing, I'm just going to send 5 jump pack intercessors out there and I'm going to charge you, but you get your stealth suits knocking around close by, you rapid ingress the Star Scythe Flamers, and then you go, cool, if you charge this guy, I'm going to overwatch you, and then no longer you OC enough to take me off the point, and therefore that is a solution that you have to stop them from easily denying you primary. So I think the Flamers are hugely popular at the moment in this edition because of just that. Being able to clear screens, clear chaff, interact with Overwatch at the most important point, which is to deny points. So with Overwatch and Flamers and 66 Flamers plus Gundrome miscellaneous and AP1 if it's not a vehicle or monster, then it's golden. And for 110 points, that's cash money in the bag, in my opinion. So I really like that inclusion in your list, because some people might be thinking, why did you take Flamers? Burst can captivate on the sustain hits too. But I've already got enough stuff in my list to do that, so I just want this particular role to be filled by this cheap unit that can give me good Overwatch, because in Kion, you're not really spending many CP in the early stages, so Overwatch is definitely something that you can afford to do, and then in the later stage of the game, you can capitalise on some of those other more brutal stratagems that are available to us.
There's an even simpler play as well, which relates to what you said. It didn't come up in the tournament, but having a unit which you can deep strike lets you ingress on an objective that your opponent's not covering with a 9-inch aura. So you can just randomly get 5 more primary you didn't have by just having that unit in your back pocket. There's not many units in the Tau book which could do that. To be honest, most carry-on lists can never make that play if objectives are more than 6 from a board edge. So it just suddenly creates another problem for someone to think about, because a lot of good players will think about you having to make a play and they'll want to prevent doing that, even if you weren't aware of it. So they're going to have to go in places they don't want to do because of the threat doing something. And it's the same for the Overwatch. They're going to make awkward moves to avoid that happening, maybe making their charge longer. But that could be the difference between winning and losing a game. So it's nice to have. I don't think I need to explain a Piranha too much, other than it's an annoying, very points-efficient model, which can sometimes spike and just kill a tank commander because you can roll 6s on hunter killers. Like,
Didn't you kill a Hellhound with a single Piranha?
Yeah, against David for just insult to injury. I've had even worse. The previous LGT, I played against this really lovely guy called Josh from Trash Wargaming, also playing guard at the time. And turn 1, he full sended 3 Lehman Russ, and I was like, well, I have no choice but to fire a Piranha guided with Tetra at the time. It was like, well, I hit and wounded both with hunter killers and a fusion gun, and there's that's all the wounds, you're dead. And I did it to David. I rolled double 6 on hunter killers and one-shotted Hellhound unguided because it was just locked in combat and I wasn't going to fall back. I was just going to be like, I'll shoot it, and I don't really care. It didn't affect the game in a macro way, but it's just funny as hell. And it's also it's another action monkey. It's not a unit of 10 crew which can die to a light breeze. So it's a nice thing. I think it's one of the strengths of Tau. It's survivable OC, even if it's on the low end, and that is something to definitely take. The final unit, I guess, just to go on to, is the TIGERSHARK,
which I was
most likely.
About to ask you. So I think what we do is there's a lot of games to discuss, and rather than going through each and every one and giving the same old, well, this is how you beat Death Guard, this is how you beat this, or whatever matchups you had, obviously there's underlining tactics that you've done throughout, but I think looking at your list from my perspective, and obviously talking to you today, is that obviously everything has a specific role, so it's probably best to kind of focus on how the TIGERSHARK has helped you in all of the games, and maybe give us some kind of pivotal plays that you've done with the TIGERSHARK that can inspire people to think, actually, I might want to take one. And it's a lovely model, and people maybe are thinking, oh, it's not that competitive, but you've proven otherwise. So talk to me about the TIGERSHARK. What was the overall plan with it? What kind of stratagems were you using? And can you give me some kind of insight on some of the glorious moments of its flight across LGT?
Yeah, so, well, it's first to say I bought the model basically the day of the data slate when they did the rules commentary update for the, I guess that was 3-4 months ago, about now. So I bought it immediately after getting off the phone with Clement Tournade. And I think, like, first I was like, that sounds good. And then, like, an hour later, I was on the phone to Tottenham Court Road Games Workshop and picked up their last model. And I built it in an afternoon and painted it, and I was in love. But so I love aircraft. That was already a very obnoxious thing for me to do anyway. Bring aircraft is generally polarizing, so I think that's maybe the first thing to touch on what it does for the army. Around that same time, UKTC added a further piece of terrain to the tournament pack, which are these 9x3 rectangles, which are about 2 inches high. And then basically it's a further piece of obscuring, which you can stage behind in the middle of the board, but you can't shoot through. And I think that created some problems, and I was worried about that if I was to continue playing Tau, because what you have to deal with that is a way to shoot over it or around it. And, we didn't have the same speed. So you might consider approaching that by playing Retaliation Cadre and deep striking behind it, or Montcar with advancing. I thought, well, there's two keywords in the game which deal with that, aircraft and Titanic. I already had a Taunar anyway, so why not get a TIGERSHARK and give that a go? Because at the time you could just drop it at turn 2 and shoot over these terrains, and it just creates a different dynamic to a game where your opponent can't stage aggressively. And I think that really adds something to the army. And even if the unit is, and I don't think the unit is broken, to be honest, it died in majority of games I played, and whether that's because I'm playing it cagey and I failed all my hazardous, or I was aggressive, killed one thing and let them kill it because I was using it like a distraction Khan effects, like, it still had its role. Its points wise and output wise is very comparable to its points is comparable to 2 hammerheads, but its output is comparable to 3. I think that's the safest thing to say. So and a lot of people were running those units anyway, so, like, it doesn't, you can see why the output of it is very, very relevant to the armies that exist. I think the in terms of, like, particular play patterns with it and things that you can do with it, just to kind of touch on this, and this is what I was discovering as I played my early games, and for better or for worse, winning my games is also what kind of encouraged me to keep tweaking it and giving it a go into different things, was that I think people look at it and think it's a giant model, so it's just going to get shot off the board. But I think when your list has all these dimensions in terms of screens, it's actually very difficult to deal with immediately, because it comes on from reserve at the back of the board. And if you have anything in front more than, I don't know, like 15, 18 inches, it's not like your opponent's going to be able to deep strike in and shoot it with Melter or 24-inch anti-tank guns. Like, it's very easy to be visible but out of range from a lot of units in the game. And that already gives you a plan for getting 2 activations out of it, which it isn't enough to table your opponent. That is a legitimate plan for a Tau army. Table and catch up on points in turn 4, turn 5. So that unit enables that if your opponent is kind of lets you have free reign off the board. The further thing to say is it allows you to take target priority, which your opponent isn't necessarily used to, and is also very helpful for a Tau army, because you can bring it down and deal with things that you couldn't otherwise see because they're further back, and you ignore, and you just use true line of sight because of the aircraft keyword. So, like, in the game against Nassim, the only thing I wanted to really kill in that matchup with the TIGERSHARK was his tank commander, because his most lethal unit into my army, it's this like a demolisher cannon is a nightmare, for a Riptide. So
Yeah.
that was what was preventing me pushing up. So I needed to get rid of that, and I knew I could see it. So that was a plan. Into other armies, for example, say you're playing against Dark Angels Gladius, you can use it to just pick up the Eradicators, or even more ridiculously, you pick up the Repulsor, then they move the Eradicators forward, and then you Overwatch them, and then they never get to play the game. So there's and that's because it's not a towering model, so you can Overwatch, which is probably a mistake. But ignoring that, you can do that sort of play pattern with it. There's other things you can do in terms of increasing its mileage and output, which is rather unusual, is because it pivots at the end of the move and you kind of have to plan where it's going. Having your own models in the place where you're going to land it the next turn prevents your opponent from screening it out. That's just a general comment to make. It has a minimum move characteristic and a maximum, and you have to deploy it, physically fit it above 20 inches of movement, otherwise it goes off the board. So you can mitigate that disadvantage by a bit of forethought and thinking about where your board presence is. And that also then starts to set out your own plan of where you're going to deploy it and whether you're going to go clockwise around the board or anti-clockwise, because you're thinking 2 turns ahead, where you want to end it up on the midline, let's say, or just send it to your opponent's backfield. So those are just like general comments about the TIGERSHARK. There's some other micro things as well, which are quite interesting. Like you can redeploy Shadow Sun with the Carrion strat to put it next to the TIGERSHARK the turn after it's come down. That allows you to get rerolls on a TIGERSHARK, which is obviously great when your opponent is going to appreciate that they may not be able to have it guided because you're shooting something behind obscuring. So you're not necessarily going to be able to see it with something else. So the reroll ones would mitigate smoke or armored content or these other defensive strats. The plane, obviously, because it can see everything, it's a good observer, so you can then immediately pay when it's observing for the strat to get it +1 ballistic skill essentially against the same guided target. So then it allows it to split fire with an extra point of BS against the key unit. So maybe you split fire the hunter killers into one thing, and then all the other ion and anti-fly weapons into 3 other things, and just kind of roll the dice. The most obvious thing you can do with it is just slow roll it till turn 3. If you're going first, ingress turn 2, or if you're going second, wait to bring it on at the bottom of turn 2, or the top of your opponent's turn 3, and then it's full carry-on. Let's say you always go full carry-on. You fire the hunter killers, you give it +1 to wound, and then you deal like 30 damage to any vehicle in the game because you're wounding it on 2s if it's standing on an objective. So like it serves every kind of role when you put it in to the, that if you kind of work out what you're going to do with it and you just kind of plan for it. So yeah, that kind of, I think that probably covers most of the things to do with it. Yeah, if there's anything you're thinking I should touch on.
No, I mean,
you've covered, jumping out to you.
I think the one thing that I obviously you've covered off the stratagems, the tempting trap stratagem from turn 3 onwards. You've also got the extra AP if you're within 9. You've obviously got Kion Goodness Sustain, it's 2. You've done the Coordinate to Engage, which is a really clever one to get the extra BS and stuff, and then the Shadow Sun with the reroll 1s, especially if you're having to split fire sometimes, the reroll 1s does help. But the one thing I like seeing is, it's a really obvious one, but it might not be obvious to our listeners, is that when you have that unit of stealth suits that's rapid ingress the TIGERSHARK, and then it's in their turn, and at the end of the fight phase, they go away, and then the TIGERSHARK yeeks over to the board. You did it against Lewis, and the stealth suits have just met them and gone, hello. It's like, how the hell have you got there? I'm a plane. And these stealth suits are like, yo. And then they can guide, so if they leave little gaps for your stealth suits to come in, and suddenly a TIGERSHARK with reroll 1s to hit and 1s to wound is brutal. So I think those little tactics that you were displaying in your game in round 6 was just optimal in terms of how to really make this beast of a flyer fight at full efficiency. Or shoot.
It also, it is a move block, which is important, like, because people can't end a move through it. So you can use that to slow armies down. There's also, it's quite janky, but the base is so large, and because of, I guess, just like the curvature of it, like if it's in the corner of the board, there's still a gap in that corner behind it before it meets the board edge. You can nestle in Shadow Sun in there, and then it's impossible to charge her. Yeah. So, like it creates like a physical gap to parts of your army, just as you would probably put Shadow Sun surrounded by 3 Riptides on an objective. Like it has these other little things which just kind of add to the frustration of an opponent being unable to do anything or not see what you're trying to do and feeling a bit impotent, let's say.
Yeah, but this is, and people might be like, oh, uninteractive plays is cancer of 40k, but actually there's lots of things in the game that are designed fundamentally to be uninteractive, like reactive moves. You can, sometimes you think, well, you can always, move around reactive moves, but actually if someone places something on an objective, the moment you get there, they can either put more OC on and survive or run away. So like there's lots of little mechanics in the game that people are using within other factions, and having this Tiger Shark is just another, and being able to like block certain things like you said, is just another tool that we have to utilize. You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't utilize them properly, then it's pointless having them. And I think the way that you put the thought process into how you're going to use it, what stratagems, and what it can do with interacting in terrain and things like that, is a prime example of a well thought out list that has done very well, not just because it brings good guns to the table. It's got a lot of other underlining factors that from a glance people won't see. So
yeah,
and
so it's not just when you use it, it's when you don't use it as well, which is a funny thing to say. There's also just as a general commentary. I'm obviously not the first person to put it on the table, but I might be one of the first to do well with it. There's plenty of people who just stuck it in their list and have not done well. So it's very clear it's not just a model you can throw on the table and expect to win with. And also just to generally say, like, it's not like the list has a great matchup into everything I play against, and the model is the sole reason I win. I did obviously lose my game against Brian in the final round. Just as a general comment on that now, just to say, like, he brought a list which goes incredibly wide, and I would describe it as a jail list in a sense of it screens the board and prevents your opponent from scoring. That's how a part of his strategy. And there's other armies in the game which do that, and they don't mind playing against the Tiger Shark because you can prevent a Tiger Shark from coming on, or you prevent it from landing in the second movement. Like, there's things people can do around it, but I guess it's your duty as the player with it to think about how you're going to use it, because in the end it's a 2-player game, and well, there's always things you can do and there's things your opponents can do, and it would be a bit naive for someone to say that I can never win against something, because there's always little things you can do to counter that sort of thing. I think it's been rare that I've ever played a game where I felt like I'm going to get 20-0'd and I'm just going to rest my head down on the floor for you to stamp on me, let's say. So
for our listeners, what I've done is I've listed all of the games that you've had, and I'm going to kind of go through the scores, but we're going to kind of like end on the kind of preparation around like the how you handled things like the pressure and the fatigue, and also having a plan and then suddenly seeing it kind of unfold within the actual tournament itself. So going through your rounds in order, obviously round 1, you won with 85-41. You were against Imperial Knights, so your list is a very stat check list. You got 3 Riptides, Ghost Kills, and the Tiger Shark, and you got the bodies and the mission play and various things that you've explained beautifully within your list creation. Round 2, you went against Dark Angels, so something that you specifically had planned for, and you said that you had the tools to deal with them, and you know how to beat the Dark Angels, so you beat Dark Angels 89-67. And then on a theme here, round 3, Dark Angels. You beat Dark Angels 76-70. And what was the mission on round 3? I think, was it Purge, or was that round 2?
I think round 3 was the taken hold with 4 objectives.
Yes.
I will say, like, I did make some mistakes in that game, a part of the exhaustion, and that's but I still won. But I was still upset at myself in a sense of like I made some fundamental mistakes in that game. I can just say it, for example, I don't mind, like, that turn 1, I drew my cards and I forgot what I drew, and then when it came to scoring them, I was like, I'm not gonna score these. And I've also fluffed a roll and given myself, I basically gave my opponent like a 15-point differential turn 1, and just made it a much closer game, but like everyone can make those mistakes,
Makes
especially
mistakes, yeah.
that early into a tournament, like you already start to feel the burn. I shouldn't have had a beer. That's the easiest thing to say. For example, I was enjoying myself, and I had a very nice opponent. I think he's a very good player on the scene as well, and has won GT. So like, just because it's an army I'm comfortable in, and I feel like I can 15-5, doesn't mean that you'll have close games as well.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same. Sometimes you make these little, should we say, boo-boos, and it's like, uh-oh. And then you when you realise it, the fact that you've identified it and realised it meant that at some point in the game you're like, okay, no, I need to switch my head on now. Come on, brush off that beer, I'll have a water. All right, let's go. And then obviously you pulled it around. It was a 76-70. So close game, but you still pulled the win. Then round 4, you went against Custodes. A favourable matchup for Tau, in my opinion, as long as you get your screening right. And also, Custodes are in a bit of a rough spot at the moment. But you got the victory there of 88-44. And then
It's okay if I'm going to just interrupt you. Sorry, I just remember one more thing about that game, and maybe just as a general point to appreciate with scores in 40k is if you go first, the games are generally closer if your opponent has end game scoring.
Yeah.
That was a factor in that game into Dark Angels in round 3 when there's 6 objectives on the battlefield. So I would say actually, I might have actually still won that quite comfortably, and I've just forgotten, but he scores a lot of points at the end, and that's what I think makes a big difference. So maybe I had stopped sweating by turn 3, and that was that. But that's just a micro thing before I let you return to talking about round 4.
I mean, you're already like, when I can see all this, you were like basically the destroyer of the Imperium. And then you went into Blood Angels, and then you just beat Blood Angels 79-68. And then you're thinking, right, I've beaten up a couple of Dark Angels player and Blood Angels. What's next? Dark Angels. Round 6, but against, obviously, Lewis from Mind Goblins. Very, very good player. And you won that one 92-75. So, at this point, you've literally played...
Going first as well.
Say again?
Going first.
Going first. Yeah.
On a map that people were complaining about being incredibly favoured for melee armies because you cannot deal with them. I imagine some of your listeners and yourself have seen that layout, but there's basically a super L right in the middle of the board, which you cannot interact with.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable.
It's bizarre. And I actually practiced that round 6 on the Monday before LGT because I was like, this map looks bonkers. I want to play on this, but I was testing like a retaliation card because I was like, my Kion does not like this. I don't have a TIGERSHARK. That's the answer to everything, but it is a bit of a bizarre. So go onto UKTC, look at the maps. Trust me, like the round 6 onwards to round 10. The round 6 one was one that everybody I think that I know who was looking to hit the top cut was looking at that map going, we need to practice this. Even making
it got weird.
Even making it on TTS manually just to practice on it because it was just weird.
Yeah.
So what was it? It was
Terraform.
Yeah. Was it Terraform on Hidden Supplies?
Hidden Supplies on Hammer and Anvil.
Hammer and
right?
Anvil. 2 super L's in the middle. And then 4 objectives, terraforming. It's like, what? So
yeah, it was insane. And truthfully, I didn't know any of the rounds past round 5. So it was very exciting and fun to playing them as it went along. It was just like taking punches, basically.
Exactly. And then finally to round off the last 3 games. And it's going to lead into a few closing questions, which is obviously then you played round 7, David Gaylord, 85-82 versus Imperial Guard, a very close game, as to be expected. David Gaylord's a very good player, and so are yourself. And then that game, obviously 85-82, and then following that, you're thinking, oh, right, I need a break now. Come on, this is mental. And then straight into Nassim with Guard. 18 Bulgrin, you tackled 36 Bulgrin back to back. And tanks, and then that game, for people that want to watch more, go on to War Games Live, show Joe some support. That video is a perfect example of high sportsmanship, high generalship, 2 lovely opponents battling it out, and they're both knackered, fatigued. They've played 8 rounds of 40k at this point. 8 rounds. That is insane. That's 8 rounds times 3. That's 24 hours of 40k at this point. So this is a great
I'm just going to tease Nassim. I'm going to tease Nassim. Nassim got a good night's sleep. Yeah. He might have not, but at least he didn't have to play round 7 against David Gaylord. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, well, you had to play...
David was such a pleasure to play against, and he is a very good friend. But gosh, I wish I had a good night's sleep before having to play Nassim.
Because the way that it works for anyone listening is that they basically had to play essentially a shadow round. So while everyone else got to go, 4 people, I think it was, had to play another round while everyone else got to go and chill out, have food, go to sleep. Whereas these warriors had to play another round. So on that Sunday, they played 2 normal games as part of the tournament. Then, so that would total of 5. And then they had to play another 3? Yeah. 3 games. So they played 5 games in one day. Is that right? 5 games in one day? Or was it 4? 4.
But it ended 4, but it ended at midnight.
Midnight. So from 9 o'clock in the morning, being allowed to be in the venue until midnight. That's insane. So, and then finally, you lost against Brian, who ended up finishing second with his Orcs. That basically ended your run, but an impressive run in that. So my final closing questions to you based off this, on that note, is how did you handle the pressure of those top tables, especially being on stream as well? So what were the kind of things that you did, or maybe did you have a process in your head that the pressure didn't really affect you? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this is a very individual thing, and I think I'm definitely, as yourself, had the opportunity to play high-level games and play the X and O, let's say. And I think, unfortunately, it's a bit like I'm going to compare it to a job interview. You're going to bomb some when you first start. You need to just practice and practice and practice, and play against people who are a lot better than you to get over any pre-game internalized thoughts you might have. I think you just have to get past that and understand that it doesn't matter who you're playing against. They're a child inside, or actually more appropriately, they're just another good guy for the most part, and they're there to do well and have a clean game of 40k. It doesn't matter that they've played more events than you, or maybe have a better win percentage or ranking. I think going into every game, it didn't really that didn't faze me at all, partly because I have played enough high level games to be over that. So I'm grateful for that not being on my mind. The second thing is my own personal expectation of the event was already achieved, so I did not feel stressed about whether I won or lost any of those games or how close they were, because I felt like my goal was to go undefeated in the Swiss stage of the event, and I had already got that. I mean, I already went beyond that, getting best overall. So I would have been happy to lose the 6th or 7th game for the same reason I lost the previous year at the Invitational. It meant I got to go to bed, and that is something we were playing for. Just as I bought the taxi home for me and David, we both got a good night's sleep. So that's a very nice thing. I think that's a bit cheesy and half glass full, but I think expectations are so important, because if you just set them too high, you're going to just disappoint yourself every time, because there's a lot of things out of control in a game of 40k, as it's a dice game. Just rolling the first turn would have been enough probably to tilt some of the best players into David and Nassim, because I went first into both of them, which is not what I wanted to do on these missions, which have such an emphasis on primary scoring, which favors the person going second. So that's one thing to say. The stream game, truthfully, I think if I had thought too much about being on camera, I would have choked, because I don't want to think about it. I'm not the most extroverted person. So I think it's just kind of clearing your head and focusing that you're just here to play, a good game of 40k, and try not to think anything else. So put your phone away, because every one of your friends, and even people you don't know, are going to be texting you during the game. And it's to be a bit crude, it's like you've got a vibrator in your pocket. So
Yeah.
like, don't have that there. Instead have lots of like snacks and water, and don't feel like, yes, I was on the clock and it came very close, and I'm sure people were worried about it, but like, it didn't matter that I needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the game. I was going to do it. Like, I don't think I would have necessarily won that game if I was kind of jumping about needing to pee, because that's just one more thing on your mind. So like, you've got to kind of just have a bit more of a pragmatic view of like what you're there for, and it's just to play a game of 40k, not to cause yourself pain above anything else. Like, we're already under physical strain for it being our 8th, 9th game. Like forget about those things. Your opponent's in the same position. They're not going to be a dick about it. If they are, it's not, you shouldn't be playing that game, to be honest. Like, they should allow you to have a breather. I certainly had some during that.
I couldn't agree more with what you
said.
In terms of like I think I don't know how to quite explain it maybe as eloquently as you put, but the way I see it is, that kind of like joke, I think it's in like, I used to watch a lot of Scrubs, a classic program, and when Dr. Cox just goes in his ocean mode where it's just like the sea crashing, it's like, that's what I do. I'm focusing very much on the here and now, the present. My main concern is that I'm going to have a great game with my opponent, and that's it. So everything else is just white noise. The pressure of doing well. You obviously, unbeknown to you, I'd already shared the links on my like Tau Discord and stuff like that. I was like, Lewis on stream and stuff like that. But if I had a message, you'd be like, hey bro, I've got all these people like commenting on it. You've been like, ah. So it's just understanding that there'd be lots of people like eyes on you. But if you just forget that and just go, look, I'm just wanting to play my game. I want to have a really great game regardless of the outcome. Then it just kind of takes away that kind of pressure. And I always say to people when planning for events and being in events is that whatever goal you have, make it smart, make it realistic, but don't put pressure on achieving the outcome. Focus on the behaviors, and those behaviors are inherent to what you're doing at every step. Is it taking a break? Is it taking a step away from the table? Is it looking and is it communicating with your opponent better? Maybe you have a situation where you and your opponent don't quite connect how you maybe have in previous games with other opponents. Then try to focus on that communication with two people. Very specific things at specific times, rather than having to try and deal with everything that's all the plates at once. So I think, the game against you and Nassim, and I said this to you before we started this recording, it was a joy to see both of you working together for the outcome of the better general winning, but not at all costs. It was no kind of like gotcha moments. It was clean, it was cut, it was sportsmanship, it was everything that people should aspire to play, especially at the top levels. So you've got to give yourself a round of applause for that. And I know obviously as a modest person you're like, thanks, but please stop giving me compliments. But at the end of the day, the video itself will, people need to go and watch it, because it's great. It's a great game to watch. And I think at the fatigue level that you mentioned, I mean, there's nothing more to be said about that. I actually bought a rolling mat to stand on, which did my feet the world of good. Snacks, water, that kind of thing. It's amazing how much these little tiny details will help your overall performance on a sub-level.
I can also pass on some advice from Liam VSL, from speaking to him. Like, you may be wondering whether he's at the event or not, because he actually disappears between every round just to get some me time. Let's say he goes and stretches, drinks and eats well. I don't know if he's thinking about the game, but at least for me, I do not spend the time immediately after a game thinking about the previous game, because it's not appropriate. You're about to play another game against a different army or whatever, like in most circumstances, and certainly against a different person. The facts are so different that it's just like, approach it fresh every time, and don't go into it under the assumption you've already lost because of prior mistakes, which are not really going to help you. Like, I think I would have been blindsided if I had gone into the game against a team thinking it's going to be just like playing David, that all over again. And I really like your point about the mat. Like, even just going to events wearing Crocs, like, just do it. Take your shoes off, but bring some aerosol. No, like, just get comfortable. I play with a team, the Badminton Brawlers. So we're at Badminton Cafe, and that means I could wear jerseys, and I wear it on the first day of the event, but like I decide later I'd rather be more comfortable in my own clothes. Like if I'm going to wear sweatpants, I'll wear sweatpants. If I want to wear a shirt because I'm just feeling like I want to be a bit pretty, who cares? Do what you want. Like it's the same at the event. Bring all the things which make you feel kind of comfortable and relaxed. And I think that's a very individual thing which helps just enjoy the game, because part of my positive experience for that event wasn't just doing well, but like it left me very enthused about playing 40k, and I just wanted to play more kind of away from it, even if I was like had burnt my brain out. And I think a part of that is just because of like the enjoyment of playing the game, and you can probably think about the things which would kind of detract from that, and they're within your control just to kind of mitigate. So, and that will help at every level of the game, whether you're playing the best player or you're round one, you have no idea who they are.
Well, Lewis, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been an absolute pleasure to have on, but I think we should end with what we are planning next. And I'm going to Coventry. What's your next event?
This is really funny. I'm going to the Marvel Crisis Protocol WTC in 2 weeks' time. So my next list is going to be Thanos, accompanied by Red Skull, and that's going to alienate your entire audience, but it's awesome.
Actually, I think it'd be spot on. People would be like, "Yeah, shut up, Kyle. We don't want to talk about."
I will be. Yeah. So I'm going to Battle of Britain. So I'm going to be playing more team events, as I think yourself, you're going to that. So that'll be really fun. I'm very, very enthusiastic about teams. I think I enjoy it more than singles, to be honest. And that's something which I encourage everyone. I think I'm bringing Tao to that. Assuming the TIGERSHARK isn't Legends by then, which can only be my own doing, I'll probably bring a TIGERSHARK. And I can make some tweaks to my list based on the data state, which we're expecting in the next couple of weeks. Most likely Vespid are jumping out to me as something I'm going to run.
I think Vespid are going to be a great utility tool for us. I've already got some on order. Not that I need more. I've got like 25 originally anyway, the 15 of the metal ones and some 3D printed ones. But yeah, Vespid are going to be great for us. I think in terms of like events, Battle of Britain, teams, tournaments, we can obviously have a bit of a chat on ourselves and just refine our lists a little bit as well, because it'd be really keen to kind of bounce ideas off you. The thing that I'm thinking about and I'm really excited for is the Puretide Nothing chip right now, and seeing how that changes in the balanced data slate. So RepCAD is something that I've got on my table right now, and I am honestly looking at SKU lists of just insert crisis. Let's go.
Yeah, I've played one game with Retaliation Cadre, and yeah, it felt really good.
So fun.
Maybe my hot take for that, just to contribute, is I don't touch Farsight. Don't even add them to the list. I just take really skin and bone. I've got one commander with the Uppy Downy relic, and I think I have 5 units of suits. I'll go, or 4. I go 2 flamers, 1 missile, 2 melter, and then otherwise I've got chaff and riptides.
Interesting.
And it gives you a different way to deal with the staging issue, which we're talking about, the TIGERSHARK, because you're using those suits every turn of the game.
I've kind of gone, I don't want Riptides, I don't want Ghost Kills. How about 21 Crisis suits and 5 commanders and loads of Vespid and loads of chaff and loads of stuff, and been like, bosh, let's go. So it's really interesting, and what I look at is that the Puretide engram chip, if it is changed to an ability like Farsight, so Puretide's teachings of reducing a CP, you can have 2 forms of that, but we'll have to see what Josh and the
I think that would be broken as hell, because most people can't duplicate that. And I'll say that loudly enough that he can probably hear you through your microphone. Yeah, I've been looking at I think I've told some other people as well. Maybe I sound like a tinfoil hat wearer to be talking about the Tidewall gunship again. But oh my gosh, with the change to the pivot rules, it is kind of ridiculous having models like that for yeeting infantry up the board. It makes me have a second look at these really weird models. Yeah, but as I said at the beginning, a unit should be read for its abilities and keywords and what it can achieve. And I guess you could look at a Tidewall as something which screams acts like a devilfish. It pivots and lets you disembark into places, and you could stick it on top of an objective and stop someone ever deep striking on it with 3 inches. It's not the worst spent 80 points in a list. So
well, this is when
there's a lot of depth.
We
there's
talk
a lot
about
of depth.
different combos and different retaliation cadre stuff, but you and I both know when the Kroot get back on the top tables and the points get reduced, me and you will be running Kroot detachment, right?
Oh no, I think I've only got 30 Kroot.
So if you need some Kroot, mate, let me know. I've got 270.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
All right. Well, Lewis, honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I cannot wait to interact with you at Battle of Britain. I'll be seeing you there and other events, but thank you so much for your time. And for those listening, you've had an absolute pleasure. You've been able to hear all about the LGT list and the TIGERSHARK taking it down. So, Lewis, thank you so much, buddy. And
all right, thank you.
Time.
Catch you later.
Catch you later, man.
Bye.